Hi, DEC Young Leaders. Happy Thursday. I'm Steve Gregorian, President and CEO of the Detroit Economic Club. If you don't mind, just mute yourself here because we're hearing some background noise. Great to see everybody. I want to start with a couple of quick announcements. First, I'd like to say thank you to all of you.
Yeah, I think.
Excuse me, somebody's got to mute themselves, if you don't mind. Thank you.
Disconnected.
Thank you. I want to say thanks to all of you for continuing to support the DEC with your membership and by participating in our programs. I also always want to take a brief moment to thank terrific DEC sponsors for their continued support of our mission. And you're seeing these companies on your screen. March and April at the DEC, man, we've got something for everyone. So be sure to get your tickets for some events. Next Tuesday, we're thrilled to be hosting Sheryl Sandberg of Facebook. She'll be talking about their support for small business. And you know you're a March Madness fan. We got Joe Lunardi coming up. He's ESPN's bracketologist. That should be a fun meeting. And in April, we've booked Sunil Gupta, the author of Backable, the surprising truth behind what makes people take a chance on you. And we've also got former GE CEO Jeff Immelt, who has a new book called Hot Seat. So get your tickets. We've got something for everybody. Today, we're going to spend time together like we do at all these young leader meetings where we're learning from a successful executive, and we're going to grow our DEC member networks. We do want to see your smiling faces, so video on, but please, mic's muted. And if you want to ask a question of Sandy, use the chat box to let us know, and I'll call on you in order for our final portion of today's meeting. So let's get started. Our very special guest today is my good friend, Sandy Pierce. Sandy is Senior Executive VP and a whole lot of other titles, including Chair of Michigan for Huntington. And she's had a very impressive career in the banking industry and is an active board member for a top tier list of for-profit and nonprofit organizations, too many to name. She holds an undergrad and master's degree, both from Wayne State University, go Warriors. But her most important work, of course, everybody knows, is a highly valued board member of the DEC. And just to prove to you her business acumen, Sandy was an active participant in the search committee that hired me as the CEO of the DEC 3.5 years ago. Sandy's been so supportive of me personally in my role as CEO of the DEC, and I cannot thank her enough for that. So Sandy, it is so good to see you today. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Steve. And we're lucky to have you as our CEO of the Detroit Economic Club. So really appreciate you and your leadership and the invitation.
That's very
kind. Hi, everyone. Good morning.
That's very kind. Thank you. And you and I talked before this. You are our second ever Young Leader meeting CEO in November of 2011, right after Bill Ford, 10 years ago. Can you believe it?
That's really a long time ago, but it doesn't feel that long.
Yeah, well, it's good to see you. So the topic, let's get into this. The topic you chose today was navigating your career in unprecedented times. And so let me just set some context for the rest of our discussion. Clearly, this pandemic has heightened career uncertainties, and our work landscape is dominated by change, which means that the old career success rules may not apply any longer. And people have to learn, we're learning how to thrive in this new normal, whatever that is, but it might look like a combination of a hybrid of remote and in-person experiences, increased reliance on virtual communication like we're doing here, constant disruption of kids, dogs, all kinds of devices going off, and a renewed employer emphasis on workers' health and well-being. So with that as a backdrop, Sandy, how has your work life changed and your personal life changed?
It's a really good question. Let me just add to that context and take us back, because it's 1 year ago that the pandemic was declared. And if you think about it, think about 2020 as we had still dealing with a global health crisis, economic fallout because of that, political divisiveness, and social unrest after the death of George Floyd. All of that first of all, that separately is tough to manage. Put it all together, and that's really our 2020 year. And I will tell you that if you said to me last March that we're going to plan to go remote as a company, we have 16,000 colleagues, I would have said, okay, let's put a plan together. That'll take us about 3 to 4 months to figure out. And we did it literally in 10 days. In 10 days, 95% of our company was remote. And I did not know what Teams was. I did not know what Zooms was or WebEx. I knew what FaceTime was because we use it with our grandkids, but I didn't know the technology that actually existed that enabled us to become as virtual as we all are right now today. So I will tell you this, we actually introduced 2 things before the pandemic in January of last year at Huntington. One of it was workplace flex, meaning we can, you know what, if you can do some things from home, do it. Just let your manager know and talk to your manager about it. The other thing we did is dress for your day. So if you're with customers, then make sure that you're dressing appropriately as a banker. If you're working remotely, then you're not with customers, you're just talking to each other, then that's a different dress, but figure it out and dress for your day. Had no idea that those 2 things would become prominent 2 months later in March. And how our life has changed is what Steve described, is we are now still primarily remote. Of course, our branches are open and we need to be, and that's essential for our business and for customers that really need to be in person. But most of us are still remote and we're doing this. So I would say that I'm going to use a Robin Williams quote. Anybody that saw Dead Poets Society and you know who Robin Williams is, he says, I stand upon my desk to remind myself that we must constantly look at things in a different way. And I thought about that a lot at the beginning of the pandemic, is I have got to look at things in a different way as a leader in my company and in the community that we serve, so that we can get through this. And I will tell you, our lives, how we work and how we live, will be very different going forward than it was before last March.
Captain, oh Captain, that's a great movie. So thanks for that quote. Your leadership style, Sandy, and I know you, face-to-face interaction means everything to you. So how have you had to adapt your leadership style now that everything's virtual for the time being?
You know, you're right. Face-to-face is important to me. I'm a hugger and I like to shake hands and I like to be with people in person. However, what I have learned and what I learned to accept and adopt is that you can be as close to an individual without physically being there. And it was really hard for me. And I would say, to be honest with you, March, April, and May, I didn't think I could do it. I actually thought that I would fail as a leader because I am such a relational person. And I was worried about it. And I actually went to my boss, the CEO of Huntington, and I said, you know, I think the chance of me meeting our budget this year is a snowball's chance in hell, because I just didn't know how to navigate it. And what I found is that I was doing more and more of this that we're doing today, and actually calling and talking on the phone and doing videos. I found that I got really comfortable with having candid, direct, transparent, honest conversations with customers and with my colleagues. I got pretty good at it, but it took a while. And so I did have to change my style. I did have to get comfortable putting on the video. I did have to get comfortable losing connection and then figuring out how to get reconnected. So all of that took me, it really did. It took me 3 months, but I have adapted. And another quote I love, and I don't even know whoever said this, but I use it all the time, is that change is inevitable. Growth is intentional.
I love that. That's really cool. I'm going to steal it. Thank you. Let's shift to some questions on career navigation. We've got a lot of young leaders in various stages of their careers. And so what would you say to somebody on this Zoom who feels like their career progression may have stalled a bit because they haven't been able to do the things they normally would, and they feel like they aren't as visible to their boss?
Here's what I would recommend. It is really important to communicate. And I would say, do not wait for whoever you work for to reach out to you. Do not wait for a scheduled one-on-one, because everybody in this environment, I think, is working more hours because they're not commuting. They feel like they have to be on from 7 in the morning till 7 at night. And so what I would say is, make sure that you feel really comfortable reaching out. And it's if you just want to talk, or if you have an issue that you need some thoughts on, some insights on, don't be afraid to reach out. Don't be afraid to set up a Teams call with your boss. It is really important to stay front and center. And I don't mean if there's nothing to talk about, but what I've worried most about is the stress and anxiety and the isolation that we've all experienced. And I try to reach out to a customer, at least a customer every day, just to see how they're doing. And I try to reach out to several colleagues every day, even if I don't have an agenda, to see how they're doing. And so it's okay for you to actually communicate with your superior and say, how are you doing? How are you handling this? And talk about how you're feeling. That's not work related, but it certainly affects your work. It affects my work. So I would say communicate, perform. You all have goals, so do I, and make sure that you are paying attention and reporting out on how you're doing, and you'll be successful. You will. It's really, to me, fascinating that between June and the end of the year, remember what I said, I told my boss in May, between June and the end of the year, we met every single goal we had for all of the segments that report to me nationally. And I actually was so proud of the team because, like you, they were asking me, how do I make sure I'm successful? How do I show up for Huntington? And showing up and being present and making sure you communicate with your customers and with your colleagues, your peers, and your superiors, that's on you. And you'll be noticed. Trust me, you'll be noticed.
Thanks, Sandy. I'm going to remind young leaders on the call, I've got a few more questions for Sandy, but then we want to hear from you. So all you got to do is say, Steve, I've got a question. You don't have to list your question, and I'll just call on you in order. So throw that in the chat box if you have a question. So Sandy, back to you. I think it's important for people on this Zoom to know how their bosses might be thinking. Tell us how you're evaluating employees in a virtual world.
What I've done is every time I talk to one of my direct reports, and I have 19 of them, I ensure that my video's on and that their video is on. So that even though I'm not face-to-face in person, I am present with them. I am not multitasking. I am with you, just like I am right now. I make sure that I haven't changed our cadence of evaluation. So every single month I do a performance review, a miniature one, just literally a one-pager on how we're doing against our goals. Not to criticize them, but to help in areas where we're just not quite there, and how we can, in this remote environment, get there. And so I encourage my direct reports to come to the table with no surprises, no blind side, bring the issues, be upfront, and we'll solve it together. And I ask them for how I can do better as a leader and how I can help them so that they don't feel it is all on them. So to me, evaluation is not a check the box, it's a conversation. And so I don't do this crazy formal performance review stuff that I grew up with. I have a conversation, and I try for it to be a development conversation rather than, a pipeline conversation. And that way, I find out where they're struggling and where they're successful and what the best practices are. And by the time we get to the end of the year, it's just so easy. It's so easy to do the ratings of them and them of me. So to me, touching base, at least on a formal basis once a month, where you're really having a conversation about how the business is doing.
That's great. I always tell my kids, always provide value to your boss and to your employer. So the question, Sandy, for you is, how can people on this Zoom continue to provide value to their boss and their employers that might be different virtually than in person?
I'm going to go back to something that's just very simple. Make sure that you're present with them. Make sure you communicate. Make sure you're reaching and exceeding what the expectations of you are. Do not use Zoom as an excuse for not doing your job. Do not use the pandemic as an excuse for not doing your job. And I will tell you, I have been incredibly proud of how our colleagues and my friends that work for other companies have picked up themselves by their bootstraps, figured it out, and are performing. I mean, who I feel sorry for are the small businesses because of the stay-at-home order and the shutdowns. That's who I feel sorry for, because we all need to help them get when they open to get the cash flow that they've missed for a year. PPP has helped. The stimulus packages have helped, but there are customers of mine that are closing permanently every single week. So to me, you know what your job is, and you can do it successfully. We've got to help those that have had a tougher time than us.
Yeah, I feel for the small businesses as well. So thanks for all of your support and Huntington's support. So got about a minute left before we get on to the young leader questions. And again, just tell me in the chat that you've got a question. I'm going to call on you in a minute, and you can unmute yourself and ask Sandy directly a question. So Sandy, you got a minute left. What gives you hope for the next 6 to 12 months?
What the last 12 months has convinced me of is that as human beings, we are really resilient. And this is the first time in my lifetime that I have seen the world come together and figure out a solution, not without any pride of ownership. The vaccine is here because the world has come together. And to me, if you didn't believe in the resiliency of America and in the strength of this country and the power of bringing people together and stronger together, you should now. And so what gives me hope is that we will have herd immunity in the next several months. Vaccines are coming out, and we can complain about they took too long or some got thrown away. To me, that's noise, but the vaccine is here. and we are going to reopen all the businesses, and all of us are going to go and shop at them and help them and pick up those that have fallen down and haven't been able to get up. So what gives me hope is us as human beings and what we've proven over the last 12 months.
I love it. Thank you, Sandy. So let's take some questions from the young leaders. I'm going to ask you to unmute yourself and turn your camera on so Sandy can see your beautiful face. And I'm going to start with Chris Bentz from DTE Energy.
Thank you, Steve. Sandy, yeah, you mentioned that you have these one-on-one forums, which I think is a great practice. I do a pretty similar practice with my team. I also try to offer them the ability to weigh in and give me feedback. I often do that to crickets. So I'm wondering if you have any strategies to further solicit input on that front.
You know, Chris, that's so interesting, because in the beginning of my career, that was really hard for people. And what I have found is that if I show vulnerability, that I know what they know, and that's that I'm not perfect and that I need help. What I generally, the way I break the ice is I give them a story of where I've fallen down. And I ask for their insights on what would you have done in that situation that I might look at it a little bit differently. That's what I do at the beginning of my relationship with every single one of my direct reports. And after that first conversation, which is at the very beginning of them reporting to me, every single month, it's just not hard for them to tell me some things that they would like to see me do differently. But it doesn't happen. I mean, it really, in all seriousness, it's just such a comfortable relationship. And believe me, not always easy. What my direct reports will tell you is that I'm fair, but accountable. I hold myself and them accountable. So I think showing that, Chris, and having that conversation at the very beginning and giving an example could help you.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you, Sandy.
Thanks. We're going to go to Derek Shinska from Highland, our former Young Leader Board Chair. Sandy.
Hey, Sandy, how are you? Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Derek.
So to the comment you mentioned, to your boss, I've had the same conversation with my boss about meeting goals and trying to develop new business in this environment. And I think a lot of us on this, my experience in Young Leaders are in some kind of production roles. What suggestions or what have you found successful within your organization that might be able to share with the group?
I'll tell you where we've been successful as an organization is we have found that a lot of companies have been afraid to contact prospects and customers. And we decided early on, just like I told you to communicate with your boss and with each other, we decided early on, literally 2 to 3 months into the pandemic, that if we're missing this, so are our customers and prospects. So we started putting in intentional plans to communicate more with our customers and our prospects. And we incorporated it across the bank, doesn't matter what segment you're in. And what we did in the private bank, which reports to me, is we started doing 3 things we learned this week, because the market volatility, as you know, was crazy. And, we managed $21 billion of people's assets. And so we started doing things like 3 things that we learned this week. And we found, we did it by video and we did it in writing. And we found that people joining by video increased every single week because they wanted that contact, they wanted that information. And then we found with prospects that if we invited them into the conversation, that they participated. And then we started having virtual breakfasts with our customers and our prospects, where we would send them breakfast, coffee and donuts, and we'd get on a video, and we'd have 5 or 6 together, customers, with me and my CEO, and we would just have a conversation on how their business is doing. So our business went up. It was crazy. And so people just started bringing us, we brought them ideas, they brought us business. So I would say that think of creative ways to connect differently with your customers and your prospects, just like you are with your bosses and with each other. it works. It really works. Incredible.
Thanks,
Some
Sandy.
feedback.
Thanks, Derek. Derek, you can go play golf now. I know you've got a tea time.
I'm watching golf today, not playing.
Does that help, Derek?
Yes, it does. I mean, we're doing a lot of the same things, candidly. I'm just curious, kind of, that group thought mindset moving forward it's all helpful. So I really appreciate it.
Let's go to Almir from McLaren Health. And Sandy, I've got 3 questions. So if maybe you can just take about a minute each, that'd be great. Almir?
Yeah, hi, Sandy. Thank you so much for today. My question is, no doubt there's businesses closing as a result of the pandemic. And my question has to do with, do you think new businesses will take advantage of the opportunities of the ones that are closing? And what happens with different markets? And what are you seeing from your perspective across Michigan and the region?
Okay, you were cutting in, Amir. Steve, can you help me with that, or Christina, with the question?
Do you think, well, there's a lot of business closings as a result of the pandemic. Do you think this will lead to new businesses taking advantage of those opportunities?
Amir, it's already happening. So what we're seeing is that what happened is businesses that didn't have the liquidity to sustain the pandemic and the closures, small businesses are using, some of the small businesses are so small, they're using their personal credit cards rather than a bank loan. And so at some point that liquidity runs out, and those are the ones that needed the PPP help the most. But after that runs out, a lot of them suffer and then they close. What we're finding is as soon as a business closes, another one is right behind it, taking advantage of that space or that business model. So that doesn't make me feel any better for those that have lost their business though. And we're seeing that really across our footprint. What's scaring me is that there's more and more closing permanently. If you read the free press, there's more and more closing permanently every week. And I don't like that, but people are behind them trying to open up.
Thanks, Sandy. Let's go to Marissa from Aludyne.
Hi, Sandy. Thanks again for all of the insights that you've shared this morning so far. A question from my side, and I'm thinking that other young leaders might be in the same boat, making the transition from being a single contributor leader to a more formal role leader. Is there any advice or insights you can give into maybe some lessons learned when you made that transition?
I have. And what I would say is that when you go from individual to more than individual, you have to care about others more than you care about yourself. And you have to show that. And so I would just say that, sorry, I have to hang up that call. I would say that the people that haven't advanced are those that want the front and center stage, when really the people that they manage need the front and center stage. So give them the credit they deserve and don't take the credit. And you will find that people want to work for you.
Thanks, Sandy. Thanks, Marissa. Sandy, I don't want to keep you any longer. I've got 2 more questions and they'll kill me if I don't ask them. Do you have another minute or 2?
Sure, go ahead.
Thanks. Stephanie Murphy, you're next. And then we'll go to Marletta and then we'll have to wrap it up.
Steve, I would never kill you. Never, never. Sandy, thank you so much. Your heart for your people is really fantastic and phenomenal. And I'm just wondering, you're a people first leader. It's obvious. What about those leaders that you have that are more technically oriented, who maybe prefer to hide behind the screen and not connect as much? How are you helping to build confidence for them in this virtual leadership environment?
I try to demonstrate by example. I've had bosses in my career that I emulate some of their characteristics and their style. And I've had bosses where I say, like, I'm just never going to do that. I'm never going to behave that way. And I believe that IQ is important, but I think EQ is very important as well. And if you have just one or just the other, you're going to fail eventually, or you'll lose people that don't want to work for you. So you've got to you've really got to figure out how to integrate IQ and EQ. And that's what I actually try to coach people on that. I've had people that have worked for me that are very technical, very energized. But I don't want them on my team because they don't have the attitude where they care for people. And for me, that doesn't work long term. We have lots of smart people in this world. I need people that actually care about their customers and each other.
Thanks, Sandy. And Marletta, you get the last word.
Thanks so much. This is actually kind of related to Stephanie's question. I am curious more from the cultural aspect and the water cooler conversations and connectivity that's missing from the remote work environment. Are there any strategies or best practices that have kind of bubbled up from your teams that are working really well in order to create more of that organic connection?
That's a really good question, Marletta. So here's what we've done. And believe me, Sandy Pierce has not done this, but she's learned by watching others in the company do it. Some of our leaders have big backyards. And so they have invited their teams to their backyard, socially distanced early on in the summertime. And they've had cocktail hour together, socially distanced, careful, masks on, except when you're taking a drink, and gotten people physically together that way. Others have had virtual cocktail hour, virtual lunches, where no business is spoken other than what you normally would talk about at the water cooler without Sandy Pierce in the audience, without me there. And so that's been really fun for people. It's really caught on in the company. So you hear a lot going on in our company about, are you joining the virtual happy hour? I'm like, I'm not invited. So but it's working. And I would just suggest that there are ways to do what we're doing now in a non-formal, fun environment. And it only takes a half hour, 45 minutes.
Thanks, Sandy. Thanks, Marletta. Well, our time is up with Sandy. I can't thank you enough, Sandy. And I can't wait for a Sandy Pierce hug. I need a Sandy Pierce hug in person, and I think we all do. So thanks for all you do for the DEC, Sandy, and for me personally in my role. So I know you probably want to take a peek at the Spartans. They're starting at 11:30. It's your team, I know. So enjoy the rest of your day. The rest of us are going to stick around, do a little bit of networking. Thank you, Sandy.
Take care, everybody. Stay safe, okay? Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Sandy. Goodbye. And I also want to say thanks to my team for their work on today's session.